I work at a small burger joint in Boulder. Small enough, small enough that there are 3 employees can handle a shift. We all take orders, cook and sell food. It is a fast-paced and usually highly stressful job where I'm on my feet for 8 hours and where my skin becomes layered in fryer oil and burger grease. Every Tuesday I work the night shift. And like clockwork, every Tuesday, when the rush finally slows, I begin craving sweets. I consider this craving a trigger from all the stress my body has undergone, and when I act on that trigger, I further strengthen my hankering for sweets. The second part of the trigger occurs when I continue to indulge in sweets the next day at random times. And there you have it, a full fledged sugar addiction, one that crept up on me and worked its way into my life without me even noticing. My new sweet tooth, which stemmed from the original trigger of stress, built and built until one day I began to notice. I felt a less steady flow of energy in my body and was prone to spikes in mood and emotion. I noticed more craving and felt all of my time at the gym was spent in vain. Okay, no more custard, I told myself. But alas, it didn't appear that that was the way it was going to work. It did not matter how motivated and strong I had been all day. Any time I was faced with a stress trigger, sugar is where my head and body went. It's almost as if I turn off, my conscious brain sleeping while I engaged in habits. More and more, I wanted to become conscious enough to notice my triggers and start to react to them in a conscious way, rather than reverting back to old habits. My research has brought me miles closer to working on a more conscious life, one that is nowhere near perfect, but one in which I can begin to shift my outlook in order to shift my life. The Oxford Dictionary defines habit as a settled or regular tendency or practice, especially one that is hard to give up, or an automatic reaction to a situation. These two definitions bring to light the two most prominent characteristics of habit: acting without being conscious and becoming triggered. Unconscious living affects the quality of our lives in many ways, particularly the habits we develop. The key to changing or quitting these habits may not depend on motivation or willpower, but the ability to acknowledge oneself in order to take small steps towards conscious living. Not all habits are bad. There are many habits I engage in which are very beneficial to my life, in particular, practicing handstands. About 1 year ago, I started training hand balancing every day, and the more control I gained over my body while upside down, the more aware I became of the whereabouts of my spine, my shoulders, and my head. This awareness fills me up with such joy every day. And I'll be referencing my handstands and my handstand practice and tendencies throughout my talk because I think that our physical habits are just as hard to break as our mental ones. We also have habits like laughter, stretching, or making facial expressions, which we do without thinking. They are they are habits. There's also habits like my handstands, which we cultivate over time, like brushing your teeth. Every day when you're little, you're told to brush your teeth in the morning and before you go to bed. And before you know it, it's become a habit. Before I begin, I'd like to introduce two familiar words, but pair them with some potentially new definitions. These two words are consciousness and subconsciousness. Consciousness is our conscious experience is a broadcast of our subconscious mind and was developed over evolution so that we can express ourselves in the physical world. Tests were run on the brain which showed activation for certain movements seconds before there was any conscious thought to make said movements, further proving that our conscious experience is really an expression of our subconscious. If the way we react is directly tied to our subconscious experience, then it is no wonder it is so hard to break or kick a habit or change our view on something. Our thoughts and emotions are deeply rooted in something we cannot understand but live to express in our every action, thought, and feeling. It was becoming clear to me that breaking a habit was much less about willpower or motivation and more about getting in better touch with my subconscious and learning to slowly shift how I react to my triggers. In the same way that we cannot fully understand our subconscious, we can also not fully control our body movements. This is a photo on the right of someone who practices handstands very minimally. Take note of the arched back, closed shoulders, wide hands, and tensed neck. I can almost guarantee you that if you've never practiced hand balancing before, this is what you would look like upside down as well. We now have a definition of habits, but it's potentially still unclear how habits work in our brain. In the TED Talk, The Power of Habit, Charles Duhigg references a study where a scientist surgically placed 150 sensors in the brains of rats. After the surgery was completed, the scientist dropped the rats into a simple maze with a piece of chocolate at one end. At first, the brain activity of the rat was constantly spiking as it slowly explored the maze until finally discovering the chocolate. The same procedure was done about 100 times, and as you can imagine, the rat's brain spike went down and down until eventually it became that of a sleeping rat. We can deduct that our brains work in a similar way. Once we have done something a certain amount of time, it no longer takes thinking about. We have a trigger, take part in an action, and then get a reward. This is what I feel when I begin craving custard at 8:30 at night. I have indulged in this action so many times that it becomes a reaction, like sneezing, in response to stress. To relate this back to handstands, I will talk about tuck-ups. Tuck-ups are one of the most fundamental skills in hand balancing one learns. The tuck-up motion and holding a tuck-up is what first strengthened my handstand.
Ball first.
So as you can see here, that was a good tuck-up. And in this tuck-up, his shoulders are closed, his feet are going out rather than up, and his head is tensed. From there, learning the skills of a tuck-up was all about repetition. Repetition is the key to breaking a habit. At times, I could feel so strongly the lack of control I had over my body, and in the same way, when craving sweets, the lack of control I had over my actions. I needed to find new exercises, so to speak, to strengthen the parts of my brain that want to eat healthy. My wanderings brought me to a blog written by Leo Babauta, and in this blog, there are 2 points that piqued my interest. Those are, take the smallest step and approach the learning with curiosity. We started with curiosity. I did not try and change anything about my habits or behavior yet, but made a clear effort to just notice my behavior and study it. I performed this quiet investigation with my handstands. I would kick up against the wall and simply hold the space on my hands, trying to understand what my spine was doing and where the weight of my body was on my hands. By holding this space, I slowly began to sense where I was, and in the same way, by noticing my tendencies, I realized when in the day I am most prone to triggers and why. In handstands, it was the arch in my back and the weight distribution of my hands that needed the most attention. In my life, it was breakfast, stress, and eating regularly that needed the most attention. If I did not eat a prog for breakfast, it was all over. I noticed that if I eat less than 5 times a day, I begin to feel groggy and lost. Stress was the hardest aspect for me to work on. How can I combat this overwhelming feeling? How can I keep it from dictating the decisions I make? It did not feel like there was a quick answer to this issue, and I needed to take small steps to alter my reaction to stress. I decided to turn my direct attention away from stress and focus on things that help me release stress. This is a video. The Naval Austin McRaven gives a speech to the graduating class, and he talks about the importance of making our bed and how having small good habits can perpetuate big change.
It was a simple task, mundane at best, but every morning we were required to make our bed to perfection. It seemed a little ridiculous at the time, particularly in light of the fact that we were aspiring to be real warriors, tough, battle-hardened SEALs. But the wisdom of this simple act has been proven to me many times over. If you make your bed every morning, you will have accomplished the first task of the day. It will give you a small sense of pride, and it will encourage you to do another task, and another, and another. And by the end of the day, that one task completed will have turned into many tasks completed. Making your bed will also reinforce the fact that the little things in life matter. If you can't do the little things right, you'll never be able to do the big things right. And if by chance you have a miserable day, you will come home to a bed that is made, that you made. And a made bed gives you encouragement that tomorrow will be better. So if you want to change the world, start off by making your bed.
It was in this light that I decided to use running in order to relieve stress and set myself up for an active day. If you can believe it, it worked. When I ran for 10 or more minutes, I was less likely to crave sugar at night. The longer I ran, and in turn, the more stress I relieved, the better I felt. I also turned to my friends. When working at Snarfburger, I just simply asked them, if I pick up a fry, knock it out of my hands. And I actually didn't pick up a fry that night. I didn't eat any fries. I also obtained inspiration from a TED Talk called Forget Big Change. We start with a tiny habit, which holds 2 points I practice today. The first is to start small, really small, like floss one tooth a night small. And this is actually the example that the author uses. So I decided to try it. I started by flossing one tooth a night, moved to two, and eventually I was like, hell, I'll just floss my whole top mouth at night, and then in the morning I'll floss my whole bottom mouth. And now I floss my teeth about twice a day, and it's just a habit that I have. And the second part of this TED Talk that really stuck with me was being proud and celebrating your victories. It's pretty incredible the immensely positive effect one seemingly arbitrary habit can have. I'm working on fostering tiny healthy habits which build me up and make me happy and proud of who I am. This brings me such joy, just being able to celebrate little things that I do. For example, when I make a meal now that I'm really proud of, I dance with it in the kitchen. It's silly, but it helps me enjoy my food more and makes me feel proud of what I've done. Just like it is important to celebrate our everyday habits, celebrating my handstands habits has been a crucial part of my learning experience. In the 10-week course I took part in, there was such a loving and supporting community of people who were constantly cheering me on, celebrating my success, and helping me persevere. Making these small changes in my life has already begun having an impact. It does not matter how busy or lazy you feel like you are, all it takes is 10 seconds of your day to start a new habit that makes you happy. The most incredible thing about starting new habits is how you get to watch them grow into something substantial, amazing, and rewarding. Learning to notice my triggers and become more aware of myself was the first and most important step in my journey. I urge you all to become conscious of who you are, decide what you love and want to keep, and then celebrate it. Thank you all so much.